This is session 2.1, the role of advocates and families. We're joined today by our moderator, Dr. Jennifer Potter, who's the Associate Vice President for South Texas Public Health Initiatives, Vice Dean for Research, Office of the Dean, Professor of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at UT Health San Antonio, the Joe R. and Teresa Long School of Medicine. Our panelists are Leslie McBain, co-founder of Moms Stop the Harm, Dinah Ortiz, Vice Chair of North Carolina Urban Survivors Union and a leadership team member of the Urban Survivors Union, as well as an author, public speaker, and independent consultant, and Ryan Hampton, founder of the Voices Project and speaker, author, and advocate. Thank you all for being here. Dr. Potter, take it away.
Thanks so much, Dr. Botner and Rich. I'm honored to be here moderating this panel, and I'm going to hand it over very quickly to the speakers that you're here to hear. But I want to thank the organizers for their efforts in bringing us together to discuss stigma. So I think I'm here in two capacities. The first is that I am in my day job the director of a program called the Texas Medication for Opioid Use Disorder Initiative. We are a program funded by Texas Health and Human Services to expand compassionate evidence-based treatment for opioid use disorder throughout Texas. And we also provide training and technical assistance to programs. We have a suite of recovery support services and a lot of other programs working on this issue. And I'm delighted to be working on expanding that to substance use disorder more broadly. But I think the reason I was invited to moderate this panel was that my life intersects in a couple ways with some of the issues that you're going to be hearing about today. I am the daughter and parent of people who use substances and people in recovery. And during the course of their substance use, it became increasingly clear that stigma threatened their lives and how little I knew, even as a professional who works in the field, about people who use drugs and people in recovery and the importance of advocating for the issues that you're going to be hearing about today. And it was a terrifying, humbling process. I'm grateful to all of the advocates and people who use drugs and people in recovery who have taught me so much, who continue to teach a lot to me, and they're real champions for bringing these topics into the public sphere so that we can talk more openly about these issues and address the very serious issues we have in the United States with stigma and addiction. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. Our run of show is that each of these individuals will be talking for 10 minutes from their view and perspective, and then we'll come back together. We'll have a moderated discussion amongst the three of them, and then we'll have some time for questions and answers from the panel for our audience. So I am delighted to introduce Leslie McBain.
Thank you, Jennifer.
You bet.
I'm sure that this has been pointed out at this conference many times already, but the word stigma came from the same Latin root as the word stick, and as in making a mark with a stick. So a marked person. And I'm sure that back in ancient times and not so ancient times, the person marked with a stick was marked with a stick because the community or the tribe perceived the person as dangerous or too different to include. So I think stigma exists today for a reason, that there's a direct thread from ancient times to now. And it makes me ask the question, have we actually evolved? And there's in many respects, we have not. My story is my son Jordan's story. He died from a prescription drug overdose at the age of 25 in 2014. He was my only child. The short story is this. In late teenage years, he was what he called over partying, what I called problematic substance use. I don't know when the partying intersected with addiction, but it did. It was sort of a black box at some point. But when he was 23 years old, he was working on a construction site and he had a back injury. We live in a small community, so he went to our family doctor because he was in pain, and the doctor prescribed we call it oxycodone, OxyContin essentially, for Jordan's pain, and didn't treat the injury in any other way. So the doctor continued to prescribe oxycodone without treating the issue for 7 months in ever increasing amounts, until Jordan was so addicted he was barely functioning in terms of his work and his relationships and so on. Jordan came to me and said, "Mom, will you come with me to the doctor? Because I'm scared. I need help. This is not good for me." And so we went to the doctor, and the doctor's reaction to Jordan's confession, that he was addicted, was to become enraged. And he became disrespectful. He said horrible things to Jordan, one of which was, "Well, I guess if an addict's lips are moving, he's lying." That was one line I remember. And when I tried to intervene and say, "Hey, we came here for help," he said, "Hey, I don't need a social worker in here." So that was pretty bad. And at the end of that appointment, the doctor fired Jordan as a patient. He said, "Get out of here. I never want to see you again." We, with a concerted effort, we got Jordan into a detox facility where he stayed for, about the usual 12 days. He came out, clean of the drug, but still with the basics of addiction in his head and in his body as well. He relapsed. He then did some pretty successful drug-seeking behavior. He went to walk-in clinics, and doctors prescribed him a compendium of drugs, in particular hydromorphone, Xanax, citalopram. I'm missing a couple here, but he got one benzo, which was probably the straw that broke the camel's back. One day he took each of those drugs in the therapeutic amount, which is whatever it was prescribed, 1 or 2 tablets or pills, and the combination stopped his heart. He was alone in his apartment, listening to music, had his headphones in, so his death probably wasn't agonizing. It was probably quite peaceful, and I do take some comfort in that. So do I blame the doctor? Yes, I do, in part. If he had been able to approach Jordan's issue with some compassion, with some information, instead of coming from a place of stigma and fear and ignorance, he could have helped Jordan. And I think that was a moment wherein Jordan might still be with me today, but who knows? We don't know that. So that was Stigma with the capital S. And that's what eventually drove me into activism and advocacy. The group that I co-founded with 2 other women who had similarly lost their sons to drug harms is called Mom Stop the Harm. We initially gathered because we want to advocate for better evidence-based, compassionate drug policies that support the lives of people who use drugs. We started with 3 of us. We have about 2,300 members now across Canada, and about 1,000 of those are in my home province of British Columbia. We have evolved into support as well as advocacy. So what do we see and what have we learned on this journey? Families face isolation, whether their child or their loved one is in problematic drug use now or has died. If our child has died, we experience people saying such things as, maybe it was for the best, or he's in a better place, or it was in God's plan, things that only tear apart whatever heart you have left. So yeah, families experience isolation. Other family members often step back, not wanting to be associated with someone with a drug problem. Often friends and family are fearful of the subject. They don't feel comfortable engaging in the conversation. And often others just judge the family. Where did the parents go wrong? Why couldn't they control that kid? Or where were they when the girl was out in the middle of the night? Moms and dads carry enough guilt, enough anxiety, enough stress without the judgment of those who do not see inside a family dynamic. And so the support families desperately need, the support they've counted on before addiction happened, and thought they had, has been diminished. This is not always true, but it's too often true. The media also makes it difficult for families to rid themselves of the ugliness of stigma. Images of homeless people injecting drugs in alleys, people who have fallen on dire circumstances with severe mental illness, trauma, racism, poverty. do not represent all people who use illegal substances or are addicted. So this makes it difficult for all groups across the board. At conferences and webinars in the media, we show photographs of our kids, our gone kids, who are generally white and middle class. We didn't design our organization that way, excuse me, but we find that often other cultural groups have even greater stigma within their cultures and communities and don't want to out themselves. They may know about us, but they don't join. We learned quickly in our organization that we needed to provide some kind of real support for families in grief, telling them no matter what, they can survive this. I don't know how many times I've said that to, particularly to moms, you will survive this, because people do feel like taking their own lives sometimes after the loss of their child. And we don't pull any punches. We tell the truth that this grief will last a lifetime, but that we can go on in this new reality. We can soften the pain over time, and we may even find joy again. So we have two types of groups: healing hearts for those people in grief, and holding hope for those people with a loved one still struggling with their substance use. We learned that this kind of support inspires advocacy. It makes people feel stronger. It makes people connect with others that have had the same experience. And they somehow lose their fear of speaking out. What we're doing to create more room for diversity is, and this is new, so we don't know if this project is actually going to work, but we have engaged people from our First Nations community and from the Punjabi community in our area to rewrite our training manuals for the people who facilitate the groups, who are peers, by the way, and so that they might be able to start support groups in their communities that work for those communities in a culturally sensitive way. Like I say, we don't know if this is going to succeed, but it was worth trying. It is worth trying. We encourage people who have lost a loved one to write an obituary that includes the cause of the person's death. If it is a, sorry, I lost my place. If it is a death from drug harms, saying so may start a conversation, and more importantly, it may relieve the family from the burden of not telling the truth for years to come. In fact, a story that happened about 6 months ago is we saw an obituary in a newspaper in Saskatchewan, and it was a decade after this couple had lost their son, and they wanted to correct the record, and they said, we didn't say back then what this was, what happened to our son, but we want to say it now. And they brought it right into the public, and it was such a courageous thing to do. I mean, it wasn't somebody we'd talked to. They just knew they couldn't carry that burden any longer. We give webinars and workshops on how to talk to friends, neighbors, and families on how to frame addiction. Evidence-based and from the heart, and our actual real stories. And for people who have their loved ones still with them and in substance use, we provide not only support and information, but we try to find the scant resources available for their loved one in our community.
Thanks, Leslie.
A whole nother thing.
I'm so sorry. I want to continue, but maybe a final thought. I want to make sure 10 minutes goes fast, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. Okay. Yeah, I thought I had time this, but so I guess what I want to say is finally is that more people are dying in Canada from toxic black market drugs than ever. We are advocating strongly for a safe, legal, regulated supply of drugs for people who need them. But many governments are throwing all their dollars into treatment facilities. And this is well and good, but it is not going to stop the deaths. We know ultimately that stigma is at the bottom of politicians and people in power, the root of their decision making, and shame and blame may work, so we will use whatever's at our means. I could go all political, but I guess I don't have any more time. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thanks so much, Leslie. Please take those thoughts and put them together, and we'll loop back to them in the discussion. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's a pleasure to meet a fellow Canadian. Dinah Ortiz, you're up next.
Wow, Leslie, thank you so much for that amazing story. And I'm really, I identify with parts of it, and sorry for your loss. Um, when you spoke about going to the doctor with your son, it brought me back to when I was pregnant with my daughter, who was actually stolen from me by the child quote unquote protective system, and convinced my siblings to pretty much take her and adopt her while I was in prison. But I remember that I was afraid to go to the doctor. So I spoke to the street doctors, the people that I had, a camaraderie with, the people that had the answers, that had been through it before. And what they told me was, this was 18 years ago. And what they told me was, you should get on methadone. Your baby will be born, safe. It's a safe drug to use. And it's a very, very oversought weaning process that she is sure to be taken care of. And so I did just that. I stopped using drugs and I went and got on methadone. And that's when I went and to see my OBGYN, and when it was an older white man, and I'll never forget, crystal clear blue eyes, gray hair, white jacket, just kind of stood out and stays out in my mind. And I was so proud of myself that I had gotten on methadone, and that I had stopped using heroin, because to me, that was going to kill my baby. And of course, I was very uninformed back then. And when I went and I explained to him that I had stopped using heroin and that I had enrolled into a methadone program. There was a lobby full of people. This was in Florida. So I really, back then, there weren't a lot of people of color back in Florida. And so I was probably his only Black patient. And he screamed at me, and the whole lobby could hear it. I swore that the building shook. And he basically scolded me and told me that my best bet was to go back on heroin, because I was just supplementing one drug for the other, and that I was doing the same damage to my child. At this point, he stormed out of the office, and I just left. I was left with all of these emotions and feelings, thinking that I had done the right thing, but clearly I hadn't, because the doctors know best, and that I shouldn't have listened to the people that I listened to. And tears were coming down that I could not stop. I could not hide. And I walked out defeated. And so I stopped everything. I stopped methadone. I stopped everything. And what happened was that I ended up going into labor and ended up having to have a C-section. And on the labor table, I remember that they were giving me all of these, the epidural and all of the things to prepare me. But what I was going through the most was withdrawals, because I had stopped cold turkey. And the methadone, it had been over 48 hours since was in my system, and I hadn't done anything. Prior to getting on that steel labor table, my former sister-in-law had offered me a Xanax, and she was like, it could just take off the edge. And so basically my daughter was born with Xanax in her system that was not prescribed to me. And that's why she was taken from me. But the entire time that they were cutting me open, I felt every cut. I felt every slice. I felt them pulling my baby out of me. None of the drugs that they gave me worked. And it was the worst experience. What was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, because I have 3 sons, and I so wanted my daughter. And what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life turned out to be the worst day of my life. And knowing that a couple of weeks later, I would have to turn myself into prison. I would not be able to bond with my daughter. I wasn't able to be left alone with my daughter. I wasn't able to hold her by myself. I was not, I had eyes on me from every angle. And so I was never able to bond with my daughter the way that I wanted to. The 9 months that I spent picking out her name, only for her adoptive parents to then go to court and change her name completely, and erase me from her life and never tell her that she was adopted, was just too much for me to bear. So I did my time in prison, and I left the state of Florida and I came to New York. And by this time I was homeless. I had no support. I had my boys with me. And I did not want to look back at Florida. I didn't want to look back at the family members that stabbed me in the back, that stole my daughter. I didn't want to look back at any of that. And so I moved to New York and I came straight into the shelter system. This was back in 2007. And I was married to this man that was on heroin and using heroin, as I was trying to get my life together and be, a mother, or the mother that they say you're supposed to be to your children, right? Which is no substances, abstinence only. And nobody had ever asked me why I began using substances. And I realized that throughout all the therapists that I've seen and all the people that I spoke with, nobody ever wondered or asked me why. And the truth of the matter was that it was trauma. It was, me losing my mother, who I was very close to at the age of 13. My father did not have a good relationship with me. He favored my older sister. And I was the youngest of 9 siblings, 5 brothers and 3 sisters. So I left my home at the age of 16 and kind of just grew up in the streets. And so, I ended up marrying someone who was just, who was using drugs, and he would hide it from me. Eventually I found out about it, and the cycle just continued. And I tried the 12-step programs. I tried all of these programs, but none of them worked for me. For me, the 12-step program, I remember that, it was all about the time under your belt. And it was all about, I've got 30 years clean, quote unquote. And, I've got 25 years clean. And if you so much as drank a beer, you had to start all over again. And I was like, well, beer's not even my drug of choice. Like, I don't really even like alcohol so much. So it would drive me to test myself. And I would keep like a case of beer in my refrigerator to test myself, even though I knew that wasn't even like my drug of choice. And eventually I just kind of saw through all the bullshit when one of the married sponsors tried to assault me. I knew that I had to leave, and I knew that wasn't for me. And so in New York, what I found was a community of harm reductionists that embraced me and created a safe space for me and accepted me for who I was and met me where I was. And it was this feeling that I was just overwhelmed with the empathy and the compassion that I was shown, that I knew that I found my place. I knew that harm reduction was where I needed to be and where I needed to continue to stay close to my community and continue to get involved on different committees, the Senate Opioid Task Force Committee, many other committees, just bringing the information from the community to these policymakers that were sticking to draconian policies, that were stigmatizing us more and more and keeping us more oppressed. And I just wanted to have my ear to the ground and stay close to my community and represent those that are the most marginalized, which are Black and brown mothers who are afraid to come forward because they will lose everything. They will lose their children, they will lose their families, they will end up in prison, and they will have to end up starting all over again with the stigma that they are drug users or drug sellers. And so the advice that I give to people now is that, go by the science, go by MAT's work, right? And there's a difference between chaotic use and functional use. And that doesn't mean that people are irredeemable. That means that people are in different places in their lives. And all 12-step programs are not for everyone, and abstinence is not for everyone. Everybody has their vices. It does not mean that we shut them out. It means that we embrace people, and we treat them with compassion and with empathy, and that we hire them and we employ them, and that we don't, it's not our business what substance they use or what they put in their bodies. It's our business how good they produce the work that they're in. And so it's just all encompassing that we treat drug users as human beings, and that we stop stigmatizing people. And that includes, harm reduction organizations that speak the talk, they talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk, that will have you apply, but have you take a urine test before you apply, but yet they call themselves harm reductionists and harm reduction organizations. I've learned so much throughout the many years that I've been doing harm reduction work. And the most important thing is that I keep my ear to the ground. I keep spreading the knowledge that I have. I keep listening to my community and what their needs are. That's most important to me. And letting my ego take a seat, and knowing that this is not about me, but it's about saving lives. And we have lost way too many lives because people are not willing to listen. And most importantly, that the drug war is a war on people, right? And it's a war on the most marginalized and the most stigmatized. It was treated differently when affluent white people were experiencing and being impacted by losing family members and losing their children and all of that. And so we're no different. We bleed the same color blood. And so it's about treating all of us the same and being able to employ us and being able to give us that opportunity to show that substance use is just a small part of our entire lives, right? We're mothers, we're fathers, we're professionals, we're, advocates, we're activists, and we have so many more qualities. And so you can't really tell what type of person I am by the piss that I put in a cup, basically.
Thank you, Dinah. That's a great way to end. I keep thinking of what you said about 9 months picking out your baby's name. And it's a really good example of why we need to hear voices like yours as we're talking about these issues with a national platform. Thank you. Ryan Hampton, you're up, about 10 minutes.
Thank you, Jennifer. Dinah, thank you for that. And Leslie, thank you very much. My name is Ryan Hampton. I'm an author, advocate, community member. I'm a fiance. I got engaged to the man that I am deeply in love with and can't wait to get married soon. I'm a brother. I'm a son. I'm a dog lover. I'm also someone in recovery from a 10-year chaotic use, heroin use. And I now am living in recovery. And I just want to, I wanted to, I was listening to Dinah and like, I was getting fired up, right? Because I truly believe, and I want to thank, you for your work and the Urban Survivors Union, because in the last 2 years, you all have taught me so much. And it really gave me a new view on what is it that we're advocating for as a community. Why do we do the work that we're doing? Because if we don't advocate strongly and loudly for people who use drugs, we are not doing our jobs. And I want to say that again. If we do not stand up and advocate for people who use drugs, we are all failing. And it's because of the work of the Urban Survivors Union that I have learned that, and I remain teachable through them as an advocate and through the work that I hope to do every single day. Leslie brought up stigma and the definite and where the word stigma comes from. For me, when I think of the word stigma, and I know that this is the Stigma conference or Zoom conference, at least, I feel like stigma is just a really glossy way of us of not really saying what it is, which is bias, it is prejudice, it is systemic discrimination, it is wrong, and it is, to me, insanity that we are in 2021 and we still have to have this discussion. And quite frankly, it has gotten worse, not better. And we need to look beyond just, I know I can't see how many people are on this Zoom call right now, hopefully a lot, and people are learning a lot, but we think of stigma, and maybe some of you who are listening think of stigma, and we think, well, there's, we look to the outside world. I have news for everyone. There's a tremendous amount of stigma within this community and people who are probably on this call right now. I'm sure there's people who are, shaking their heads at some of the things that are being said. And I just want to call it out. I'm a person whose life was saved because of MAT. I went to treatment multiple times. I finally got access to buprenorphine in 2015 when I went to a facility. Never had access to it before and almost died as a result of it. I was told in the beginning that I wasn't really sober if I was on it, and was forced off of it essentially. And thank God, there was a qualified, recovery residence for me to go to. Thank God, I had a peer community that really embraced me, because there were certain members of my community that wanted nothing to do with me because I was on MAT. I think I have to mention this. I mean, stigma. I had a friend of many people who are on this call, Jesse Harvey, who was, I believe, murdered because of stigma. People say it was a drug overdose that killed him. No, it was discrimination. It was bias. It was the state hunting him because of what he was doing, which was ministering to those most in need in our community. Jesse had a belief, a radical belief, radical love, that the last should come first, which is something that we all should have as a core principle when we do this work. And, people ask me, well, Ryan, why do you do advocacy? How did you get into advocacy? I know that's kind of the theme and the topic of this panel. I consider myself, and I think many of us consider ourselves, accidental advocates. None of us were this is what we want to do. I have yet to find someone who does this work who said this was what they originally planned to do with their life, was to make this their passion and their purpose. But that's where we're at. And I don't want to spend too much time on my personal story, but I do want to tell a quick story. And it's when I realized that I needed to get into this work. And I needed to jump in, and that this was something I wanted to do. My advocacy, my work, creating the Voices Project and Mobilize Recovery, and, really focusing on, community-based solutions from the bottom up in a grassroots approach to combating the drug war, to combating the overdose crisis, didn't happen as a result of my experience, which was a nightmare to me, right? I accessed treatment the last time through Medicaid. I was homeless on the street on Hollywood and Vine in Los Angeles, California, begging for help, and was turned away many times because I didn't have good PPO insurance. I didn't have someone who was writing a check for me to get into treatment. But I lucked out, and I did get into a facility. And I did get into a recovery residence afterwards. And I was able to, find a job through Uber because, again, of that discrimination and that prejudice. Nobody would hire me in the beginning of my journey because they wanted nothing to do with me. So if you're an employer, I hope you're listening. It happened to me when I lost my first really good friend and my roommate. Wasn't just any roommate. He was my roommate. Somebody that I cared about, somebody that I got to know really well, a young man named Nick. And he was living in the house that I was living in. And I had the volunteer job of the recovery house. I had the volunteer job of being kind of like the peer, one of the peer leaders of the house. And Nick came home one day and he was using drugs again. He was using IV heroin, and he couldn't stop. And he came home and he said, he made a beeline for me. It was like 7 p.m. at night. He said, look, I can't stop using heroin. I've been using for a while. I don't know what to do. I have no money. I have no insurance. I can't call my job. He was working a construction job. Can't call my job because they're going to fire me. I can't call my parents because they're going to want nothing to do to me. I'm terrified to tell anybody here at the house because I know they're going to kick me out, but I know that I have to find somewhere to go right now. I can't get into treatment. I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. And, that was heavy on me. And we convened a small group of the guys that lived at the house, and we sat down with Nick and we talked to him for about 3 hours that night. And there was no 12-step meeting to send him to. There was no, recovery community organization in our neighborhood. There was literally nowhere for him to go other than the street. And that was not my decision. That was the owner's decision, the house owner's decision. Under no circumstance was Nick going to be able to stay at that house that night. And the owner really didn't care where he was going to go. It was up to us, his roommates and his friends, to figure out what to do. So we had this noble idea that there was a hospital about 6-7 blocks from our house. And not just any hospital, but one of the best hospitals in Southern California that receives hundreds of millions of dollars in endowments, that props itself up as a leader in mental health care in Southern California, to send him there, to go to the ER room and to tell the ER doctors exactly what he told us. Can't stop using heroin, afraid he may overdose, has nowhere to go, needs help, wants help, has a lot of questions, needs support, has nowhere to stay that night. And the agreement was, if Nick went there and at least got checked out and, maybe they would hold him for a day, we'd bring him back to the recovery house. Well, that's what Nick did. He walked over there that night. He was admitted into the ER. He wasn't admitted into the ER. He was triaged in and out, never seen by a doctor, given a piece of paper with a bunch of crisis lines on it that he could call the next day if he was willing. And he died that night. My friend died and he overdosed that night, just a couple blocks from our apartment, from the units the sober living apartment. And they told us the next morning what happened. And the owner of that house said, he opened up to tell us this by saying, I just want you all to know that this is what happens, that some people have to die so others can recover. That saying today, almost 7 years later for me, is still complete BS. Nick didn't have to die so I could sit here and talk to you. There is so much discrimination. There is so much prejudice. There is so much stigma, whatever you want to call it, from all directions, from the government, from policy, from the failed drug war, from the medical community, from the education community, from the academic community, from policymakers, probably to some people who are sitting on this conference right now. Maybe you're realizing it, but it's my hope that we can combat that together by listening to each other, learning from each other, and remaining teachable. So you have to open your ears. You have to open your eyes to what is reality and what is happening in this country right now. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ryan. I just need to take a breath. There was so much in what you just said and in what the other two folks, Dinah and Leslie, said. Dinah, the reason I'm pausing is because my original question was going to be sort of a general, what is the role of families and loved ones as advocates? And I guess it made me think, how do you guys feel about this idea of rock bottom. There's this idea that people need to hit rock bottom to be able to recover. And as we think about the role of family and friends and loved ones, I'm just really curious, and maybe I'll start with you, Ryan, given what you just shared, and maybe you three could all speak to this comment.
I mean, I'll just say really quick. I mean, what does that even mean? I don't, I mean, I know that people use that term a lot and say you have to hit rock bottom. I will tell you, if somebody had said I would have had to hit rock bottom this last time, would I be here even? I'll share a little secret with you. When the night that I got that call to go into treatment, I was so over everything. I had no intention to stop using drugs. I didn't. What I really wanted was a roof over my head. What I really wanted was a meal. I don't even know how to respond to like a question around rock bottom, because I think that whole argument is just complete BS. If we wait for every single person to hit rock bottom, we're just going to kill people.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that, Dinah or Leslie? Because I guess go ahead.
Just very quickly, because I saw that Leslie raised her hand. I mean, rock bottom is different for everyone. And, how low do they want us to go, right? Because it's really about embarrassing us and keeping us down. What happens to love and compassion and empathy and treating people as human beings with the rights that they were born with? Rock bottom to me is death. And I don't want to die. And my community members and the people that we talk to, they don't want to die. And so that rock bottom bullshit it's just a fallacy. It is something that people tell themselves so they can excuse their actions towards their loved ones or their family members or community members. But it's real bullshit. Rock bottom is death, right? As long as the person is alive, let's help them. Let us help them. And recovery looks different for everyone. It does not always mean abstinence. It's not what you think that I should be doing. It is about what makes me feel comfortable in my recovery. And so let's do away with that rock bottom shit, and let's really embrace people and meet people where they're at and help them. And usually a roof over their head and a job, being employable, helps people to get out of chaotic use, right? And just be able to function. And that's really what we need to be focusing on, not about these terms that we just throw around, rock bottom, and let's turn our backs on them. And that just doesn't.
Those are, but what you're saying, those are excuses. Like, people using the word rock bottom is just an excuse for failed policy. It's like, it's an excuse for policymakers. It's an excuse for people who want an easy way out. I mean, that's what it is.
Yeah. Thanks to both of you. I think that's a really important message to keep hammering home on. Leslie, I know you raised your hand. I apologize. My computer crashed in the middle of this session and I'm on my iPad. So I'm with limited technology all of a sudden. Leslie, but I heard Dinah say you raised your hand. So jump in here and then we'll go to some audience questions.
Yeah. Rock bottom, as a mother, and for all the moms out there and dads, rock bottom is completely counterintuitive to a parent. The last thing, and people do it because they're told that this will work, and it is bullshit. It is complete. There is no evidence that this works. I've encountered a few parents who for whom it did work for their kid, but hardly any. Why would you let the person that you love the most hit rock bottom, which means removing love, basically removing support, removing anything that, take their phone away, take any, grocery gift cards away, or, whatever it is that is helping that kid stay alive and in some kind of balance in the chaos, then it's wrong. And parents, like I say, they intuitively know it's wrong, but they're desperate. So it's a complete failure of our society to ever say something like that.
Thanks, Leslie. I remember with my loved one, the stigma that I felt that I didn't even know I felt as a professional initially set me in a place where I wasn't able to talk about this with people I knew could help. And then there became this point where it was, I wasn't going to let this person die. I was going to do whatever I could with whatever I had. So it makes a lot of sense. I appreciate that. We have a bunch of questions from the audience that I'd love to get to because I think they're important and relevant. A couple quick ones for you, Dinah. I believe you said functional use. You made a distinction. What would you define as functional use when you used it in that comment?
Well, we got to stop with the clean and the dirty language, right? Because I've never been dirty. We got to stop with the, crackhead dope fiend language. There is functional use and there is chaotic use. And chaotic use is when you are pretty much like spending your last dime and just not really caring because you've lost all of your support. Everybody has just pretty much, said, let them hit rock bottom, right? So that takes you into chaotic use. And all you're thinking about is just getting high and numbing the pain. Functional use is when you can actually use drugs, get up, go to work, help people, help your community, do what is your passion, whatever it may be, and still use drugs and come home and take care of your family, send your kids to school, whatever it is that gets you through the day. Everybody has their vices. Nobody complains when the affluent people are using drugs in the comfort of their own home. It is only when it's the most marginalized, when they show those pictures of the, ashy black and brown people with the chapped lips, that those are the drug users, those are the dope fiends, those are the crackheads. But the affluent people that use the cocaine in their house in the comfort of their home, there are no police knocking on their door. There are no ACS or Child Protective Services banging down their door. Yet they go to work, they have executive jobs. That's functional use. We do it too, except for we don't have the luxury of doing it in our own home the way that they do.
So Dinah, can I just pick up on that a little bit and say one of the reasons for this panel was what can people do that are family members or loved ones or concerned people? So knowing what you know, with how strongly you feel about it in your experience, what do people need to do if they know someone who they're concerned about? What do they do with this to change the narrative?
They have to continue to love them. They have to continue to treat them as if they weren't using substances, right? And be a support to them, right? Because if you lose all of your support, you lose all of your hope. If you are left to hit rock bottom, you lose all of your hope. And all that is waiting for you is death. So think about that. Would you rather let your child or your loved one die because you were trying to teach them a lesson? It's about compassion and empathy. I can't say that enough. We have got to embrace our folks because the laws are not doing it. The legislators and the policymakers are not doing it. These drug companies are not doing it. They're making money off of the losses of our family members and our loved ones. But when it comes down to the criminalized drug use, then there are issues. We have to approach it from a place of love and compassion and just shut out all that noise and focus on embracing and meeting them where they're at, right? And that's a start. It's not shunning them and shutting the door on them.
Thanks for that. There's another question, and Ryan, I'll start with you and then others jump in. Could the panelists speak of the self-stigma and stigma in general related to relapsing, which is very often a part of someone's journey and rarely discussed?
Sure. I mean, recurrence of use is, it's part of any disease state, right? I think we have to get beyond like this thought. And it's that's like when I talk about like the discrimination, the bias, the prejudice against people like within our own community. I've seen situations where people have, people I love who've had a recurrence of use and it has killed them because of the lack of radical love, the lack of acceptance, the lack of reality. It is, recurrence of use is part of anyone's recovery journey. I believe maybe not everybody. It certainly was a big part of my story. But we have to kind of shed this, old thinking and thought that it's a bad thing. Is that what we do with any other chronic healthcare issue in this country, that as soon as someone has a flare up of a disease or a recurrence, we shut them out. We stop talking to them. We shame them. We fire them. We take away their car. How does that help anybody? It doesn't help anybody. There's some great data. I'll point folks, particularly with recovery, Dr. John Kelly, at Harvard's Recovery Research Institute just published a great study a couple of weeks ago. There was a wonderful article on it in STAT that talked about, how many times. I think the average time is between 3 and 4. Right. That takes for someone to actually get in, if their goal is like long-term, recovery or abstinence-based recovery, like recurrence of use is going to be a part of it. I like to look at, and I just want to say one more thing and then I will shut up because I could go on forever on this topic. And I see everybody getting, I see you I am an abstinence-based recovery, but every single morning that I wake up and I practice that abstinence-based recovery, it is a form of harm reduction for me, right? Like that's my harm reduction. I practice harm reduction. That's what I do, every single day. And I think we have a scale of harm reduction and we need to realize, in a sense, we're all harm reductionists, at least in my community, in one way or another, that's how I see it.
Hey, just before we go to, because I saw Leslie jump in, I wanted to just point out a language thing that you were doing, because I'm assuming it's intentional. The question came with the word relapse, and you changed it to recurrence of use. Is that intentional? And why is that important when we talk about stigma? And Leslie, then you're up.
Language is everything. And yes, it's very intentional. It's very intentional. I think the word relapse comes with all sorts of negative connotations that culture and society and the media and film and television and folks probably on this call and some that are in the medical community have attached to it. And I think recurrence of use is probably more widely accepted attached term to a medical condition.
Thank you for that. It was an important point I wanted to draw out. Leslie, I saw you jump in there.
Well, I want to actually I would speak to that, but I wanted to talk about the previous question, which is what can families and friends do?
Please,
and
yeah.
One of the things that I stress often is inside that person with the addiction is the sweet little newborn, the cuddly kid, the mischievous kid is still in there. The person who is addicted is the person first. And that speaks to the language you talk about for person first, people first language all the time. But looking for family and friends, looking at who this kid was or who this person was before they were addicted and realizing that that person isn't gone. This person just has a substance use disorder, the only disorder wherein we make people go onto the street and buy unsafe drugs in an unsafe way to stay balanced or to stave off withdrawal. The other thing is, Ryan, our statistic that we use here is far greater than 3 to 4 times. And it could be, I've heard it up to 20 times in a person's lifetime. People want to recover, people want to, but addiction is what it is in your brain, and it's the most difficult thing. And we have to have compassion with that, and we have to have the recovery facilities understand not to boot a person out because they have, I'm not used to your term, recurrence of use.
Don't quote me on that stat, by the way. I would refer everybody to Dr. Kelly's research because I read it. It's somewhere, it's several.
It's a lot.
It's a lot, it's a lot. Yeah.
So this has been such a great conversation. The time goes so fast. I've been told that we need to wrap up. I hope that everyone listening heard a pearl, because there was more than one pearl that we heard today. Thank you so much for everyone on this panel for speaking so candidly, frankly, and honestly with this call to action about doing something different related to substance use disorder. Thank you so much. And thanks to the organizers for this time.
Thank you.